The National Energy Assistance Directors Association projects that the average American household will spend $784 on summer cooling in 2025, a 12-year record. In hot states like Florida, air conditioning already accounts for 28% of total household site energy, according to the EIA's 2020 Residential Energy Consumption Survey. There is a device shown by independent research to increase attic ventilation rates by 15%, reduce ceiling heat flux by approximately 19%, and lower your air conditioning load with no electricity, no moving electrical parts, and no utility contract. It costs $20 to $100 for the unit at any hardware store, with installation bringing the total to $65 to $250. It is called a turbine ventilator. If you live in a hot climate, your home probably does not have one because the modern construction industry quietly stopped installing them. So what went wrong? And should you put one back? Let's find out. The crisis inside your ceiling. To understand why this device matters, you need to understand what is happening in your attic right now. During a typical American summer, solar radiation does not just warm the air outside your house. It heats your roof surface directly, turning the enclosed space beneath it into a thermal trap. According to the Insulation Marketplace's Residential Attic Temperature Guide, attic temperatures in most parts of the United States reach between 120 and 150 F on a typical summer day, and in the southern and southwestern states, readings above 160 F are possible when ventilation is inadequate. When the outdoor temperature is 95 F, a poorly ventilated attic can run 50 to 60 F hotter than the outside air. That heat does not stay in your attic. It radiates downward through the ceiling and into the living space below, forcing your air conditioner to run longer, work harder, and consume more electricity. The Florida Solar Energy Center, which has operated a dedicated attic and roof research facility at its Cocoa, Florida site since 1988, documented and published research that attic heat gain to duct systems can increase residential cooling loads by up to 30% during peak summer periods, a finding that is especially significant for Sunbelt homes where air ducts run through the attic rather than within the conditioned space. The goal of attic ventilation is to break this cycle, move the heat out before it radiates down. And a turbine ventilator was specifically engineered to do exactly that, using three physical principles working simultaneously. How three laws of physics work together. The turbine ventilator is not complicated. But the reason it outperforms a simple static vent, a passive hole in the roof, comes down to physics. And understanding those principles is what separates a well-sited turbine from a wasted one. The first principle is Bernoulli's. As wind passes over the curved vanes of the spinning turbine head, it is forced to accelerate. When airspeed increases, pressure drops, a relationship established by Bernoulli's principle and documented in passive ventilation analysis published by SimScale. The turbine creates a low-pressure zone at the peak of your roof that actively pulls warm air upward from the attic and exhausts it outside. Unlike a static ridge vent that relies on air drifting passively, the turbine uses the kinetic energy of the wind to drag air out of the building. The harder the wind blows, the harder it works. The second principle is the stack eject. This is the natural tendency of warm air being less dense than cool air to rise. As passive ventilation design analysis reviewed by the Clean Sweep Fireplace Resource, drawing on established building science from Sun, Wind, and Light by G.Z. Brown and Mark Decay, explains, the advantage of the stack eject over Bernoulli alone is that it does not need wind. It works on still, hot afternoons driven entirely by the temperature differential between the superheated attic and the cooler air below. A home with SO8 intake vents at the eaves and a turbine at the ridge creates a continuous pressure gradient that pushes air up and out even when the turbine is not spinning. The third principle is the Venturi eject. As air is squeezed through the narrow gaps between the spinning vanes, its velocity increases, further reducing pressure inside the turbine housing and accelerating the exhaust cycle. This compounds the suction created by the first two ejects. All three reinforce one another simultaneously. The result is continuous negative pressure at the highest point of the building, pulling hot, humid air out, and drawing cooler replacement air in through the soates below without consuming a single watt of electricity. What the research actually shows, the performance claims for turbine ventilators span a wide range in popular coverage, and it is worth being precise about what the peer-reviewed data actually supports. A comprehensive review of rooftop turbine ventilator research published on ResearchGate Rooftop Turbine Ventilator, a review and update found that in U.S. temperate climate and windy conditions, the turbine ventilator could reduce attic temperature by approximately 0.56 C, roughly 1 ff, and increased ventilation rates by 15%, from 5.3 to 6. 1 air changes per hour on average, citing the foundational study by Dale and Ackerman, published in ASHRAE Transactions 1993. This is a modest direct temperature reduction, and the script you may have seen claiming 30 F or larger numbers from a passive turbine is not supported by peer-reviewed data. What matters more than the direct temperature reduction is what happens to the heat moving through your ceiling. Research by Birch and Trado 1979, cited by the Florida Solar Energy Center in its own published research, found that ridge or turbine ventilation reduced the average ceiling heat flux by approximately 19%. The SEC's own 2005 literature review of attic ventilation impact found that natural ventilation of the attic space decreased ceiling heat flux by 37% with R19 insulation when comparing vented to sealed attics, though this measures the full ventilation system, not the turbine in isolation. The critical distinction is this: the turbine's value is not primarily in dropping the attic air temperature by double-digit degrees. It is in reducing the rate at which heat conducts through your ceiling into your living space, which directly reduces air conditioner runtime. For homes where ductwork runs through the attic, the additional benefit of keeping ducts cooler during peak afternoon hours compounds that effect. On airflow, the published research paints a nuanced picture. The 2024 aerodynamic study of wind-driven turbine ventilators published in Science Direct recorded airflow rates up to 33 CFM at approximately 13 mph of wind in outdoor testing for a specific commercial unit. Manufacturer data for standard residential 12-inch and 14-inch turbines at 5 mch of wind suggest higher airflow figures, but these are manufacturer estimates, not independently peer-reviewed data. And real-world performance varies significantly with wind speed, turbine quality, and installation. On cost impact, the NEDA 2025 summer cooling projection of $784 per household means that even modest, well-documented improvements in ceiling heat flux translate to real savings when measured across an entire cooling season. A 10% reduction in air conditioner runtime in a high cooling demand state represents genuine payback on a $150 to $250 installation. The honest caveat: the Florida Solar Energy Center's own research includes a finding that is worth stating plainly. Powered attic fans, electric motors driving exhaust ventilation did not typically result in net energy savings for homes with R11 or better ceiling insulation, because the fans consumed electricity that offset any cooling benefit. Passive turbine ventilators do not consume electricity, which changes this arithmetic. But the SEC data also establishes that the greatest benefit from any attic ventilation system comes in homes where ductwork runs through the attic and where ceiling insulation is moderate, typically R19 to R30. If your attic already has R38 or higher insulation and all ducts run within the conditioned envelope, the case for a turbine ventilator is weaker. The Florida Solar Energy Center also notes that natural ventilation, including ridge and turbine venting, can achieve ceiling heat flow reductions similar to powered fans without the electricity consumption. But it also notes that where ducts leak into the attic in slab-on-grade Sunbelt homes, sealed attic construction may outperform all venting approaches. This is not a one-size-fits-all technology. Why the modern construction industry stopped using them? The turbine ventilator was a standard fixture on American residential and industrial rooftops through much of the 20th century. Today, if you walk through any new housing development, you will rarely find one. The reasons are structural, not technical. Mechanical failure gave the device a reputation it did not fully deserve. The turbine's spinning head is also its primary point of failure. Over time, ball bearings degrade from moisture, dust, or insufficient lubrication, producing a grinding noise that transmits through the roof structure into the living space below. Cheaply manufactured units earned the turbine a reputation for noise and unreliability, a reputation that well-made modern units do not necessarily deserve, but cannot entirely shake. Short-circuiting creates a real engineering problem. When a turbine ventilator and a ridge vent are installed on the same roof above a shared attic, the turbine's more aggressive suction can reverse the ridge vent's function, drawing outside air in through the ridge rather than exhausting warm air. Roofing professionals consistently recommend choosing one exhaust system. Because ridge vents are simpler to install and invisible from the street, they became the default, and the turbine became the casualty. Aesthetics became policy. Turbine ventilators are visible from the street. Homeowners associations across the country have frequently restricted or prohibited them on the grounds that they disrupt uniform roof lines, even in states like Florida, where state law nominally protects energy-saving devices. By restricting turbines to the rear slope where they may not align with prevailing wind. Regulatory frameworks were not written for passive systems. As American homes became tighter, codes including the International Energy Conservation Code began mandating mechanical ventilation systems capable of guaranteeing precise, measurable air exchange rates. A passive turbine's output depends on wind speed and temperature variables that cannot be certified. It has no UL listing as a consumer product. It falls into a regulatory gray area that makes it invisible to the compliance frameworks governing new construction. Where it works, and where it doesn't, it works well if you are in a hot, windy climate, the Gulf Coast, the American Southwest, the Sun Belt, your ducts run through your attic, your ceiling insulation is R19 to R30, and your roof has adequate SO8 ventilation to supply replacement air. In these conditions, a properly sized and sited turbine reduces ceiling heat flux, lowers duct heat gain, and decreases air conditioner runtime, all at zero ongoing energy cost. It does not work well if you are in a cold climate where winter moisture can cause bearing failure. Your home has modern airtight construction with mechanical ventilation already managing air exchange. Your ceiling insulation is R38 or higher with ducts inside the conditioned space. Or you lack adequate SO8 intake ventilation to pair with the exhaust turbine. For most homeowners re-roofing or building new, a full-length ridge vent remains the more practical and maintenance-free choice. It is invisible, has no moving parts, and distributes ventilation evenly across the entire ridge rather than at one or two concentrated points. But for existing Sunbelt homes with attic ductwork and moderate insulation, which describes a large share of pre-2000 construction across Texas, Florida, and the broader South, a turbine ventilator at 65 to 250 fully installed is among the highest return passive cooling interventions available. A 1,500 square foot attic in a hot climate generally needs two properly sized units for adequate coverage. At $150 to $250 each installed, the total investment is under $500. In a climate where NETA projects $784 in summer cooling costs, even the documented improvement in ceiling heat flux, approximately 19% reduction per Birch and Trado, FSEC confirmed, represents meaningful payback within a single cooling season. The turbine doesn't know it has been forgotten. On a windy afternoon in July, it still does exactly what the physics require. The question is whether your roof gives it the chance, and whether you understand clearly what it can, and cannot, promise to deliver.